grandfathers.
We do criminal law.
Steiner.
We do all
He had his meat market,
the second half.
restaurant, I guess, yeah, little cafe.
When they changed.
My understanding, Soupies came to the coal region when Italian immigrants came over to the States. A large population settled in Coltmont, Pennsylvania, and they were primarily Calabria, Calabres. My family came from a town called Isca, which is also in Calabria, and that's where I learned the recipe. Soupie making runs as far back as when my grandfather was a child, and he learned from his grandfather, or from his father. And my grandfather was born in 1911. His father came over to the United States in the late 1800s. I have a lot of memories of stories my grandfather used to tell me. He was Carl Avellino, great man, and he would tell me stories about when he first started making with his father, that they didn't have all the equipment we have today to grind the meat. So what they would need to do is they would get their fresh hams and they would cut the meat and cut it into small cubes and actually hand stuff them into casings. So looking back at that time frame to what we do today, the process was a lot harder. And the curing process was different too, because you're talking about solid pieces of cube meat instead of ground meat. Soupies, supersadas, they need a cool air to cure them. Obviously, if any kind of meat, I mean, you're dealing with raw meat that is salt and air cured, and if you have warmer temperatures, meat it won't be able to cure. So the cold air helps with keeping bacteria low, and the salt obviously helps with the curing process. The way we make them, we press them because it helps to get the moisture out and helps the drying process. The round, I have made some already that have been round, just to experiment to see how they come out. It just takes a little bit longer to cure. I know, I'm not 100% sure, but I know the stuff like at the Bruno Brothers, the round ones, they use a cure step to help with that process. The history that I learned from my family, they always press theirs, and it helps to get the moisture out of the meat and helps the drying process. Everybody kind of makes them their own way. A lot of people now, just to save on time, they get their meat ground. However, I like to do it the way my grandfather always did. I'm big on tradition. I like to make the soupies. I get the fresh hams, I trim them, trim the fat off them, debone them, cut them up, grind it. And after it's ground, I like to, we season it. Pretty much everybody uses kind of the same recipes. This might be an ounce here different. Salt, cayenne pepper, paprika. Every once in a while I'll throw in some coarse black pepper, just to change up the flavor of it. But our recipe came over from Italy. That's what I use to this day. And I will continue to use that. I have guys that help me make our soupies, and they're really big on putting the tapes around their fingers so they don't rip their fingers when they're tying. When I first started, I was introduced to making soupies when I was 10 years old, and my grandfather and grandmother, they made them prior to that. Now you have like this big crews of people making soupies. It was just two people. It was my grandfather and my grandmother. And my grandmother, who was 4'11", little Polish lady, she tied them, not using any tapes, and on her fingers. And just that generation was really tough. They just tied them up, no complaints till later. When she was washing her hands, she felt the burn a little bit. But they allowed me to come into the process when I was about 10 years old. My grandmother, she tied. My grandfather, he would stuff the meat into the casings, and I would fill the hopper with the meat and push it down. Unfortunately, when I'm making soupies, the family end of it kind of dwindled when my grandfather died. So a little bit of history. After my grandmother died, my grandfather and I would make them, and we needed to get a little bit extra help, so I would have a friend help with the process. Now, after my grandfather died, You know, I usually try to have 3 people. That works the best. I would, you know, I had my friends join in, and we would make them. We do it the old school way of getting the hams, deboning them, cleaning the meat, and grinding the meat, and the whole process. Well, we had the house built. I just knew that from being around the land, which way mostly the wind comes, and I knew the one part of our basement had a window, so I decided to frame that out, make that my soupy room. For me, it's something I did since I was 10 years old, so I'm doing it for almost 31 years. So it's definitely a passion. It's definitely a tradition that I want to make sure that my kids experience. And I know my 2-year-old, he eats Soupies like there's no tomorrow, and I want him to be able to help me with it and experience. So I want to keep a room or I mean that's important. You have to have a space to do it, or you can't do it. And with my son, when he was only 1 year old, he was having a little bit of a tantrum. I took him down to the Soupie room because I had to get the Soupies off the press. And he actually helped me with 157 Soupies. He took every single one and handed it to me. And then halfway through, he tasted one by putting his tongue on it, and then he handed it to me. So I gave that one to my friends. People talk about Soupies being popular here, but a lot of people make really good Coca-Colas too in the area, and which is also, like, you know, just a carryover. But that was their source of food. They didn't waste anything. You know, that was their pig, and that's what they did. When they would butcher their pig and they would make their sausages and stuff, like say this, for example, the Supersada, they would allow that to hang from start until the end of the season. They didn't put theirs in oil. They didn't put theirs in oil until the end of the season. So that meat would hang down there. They would eat it off the line after the curing process was over. They would eat it right off the line, and use it for cooking, or just eat it like that with whatever, cheese or bread. And but not until the end of the season, which is more towards April when it started to warm up. If they had anything left over, that's when they would preserve it in the oil. Here we kind of speed up that process, and we put it in oil right away. I personally will taste them off the line. I think it's a really good cured meat. It's a fresher flavor. And the oil, you know, it changes. The taste changes in the oil as it sits, and it gets better. And you know, to some opinion, I like it fresh right off the line, as well. One of the things is as a I guess modern day soupy maker that I wish I would have listened more to was my grandfather. Making the Soupies, you know, if you have your ingredients right, that's the easy part of it. He always told me, make sure you pay attention to when they're hanging and the drying part of it. Unfortunately, I didn't, and sometimes you have to learn the hard way. I mean, I knew enough, but not in detail. I mean, I remember times where he said, you got to get over here right away. We got to get these off the press. They're starting to swell up. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? So I would go there. He would use vinegar water, wipe them off, rehang them, then repress them down the road to save them. And when you're making these, you start thinking about these memories of stuff that he would tell you, and the temperature and how much air they should get, and then how they should feel when you before you take them down. It's all important parts, and the only way now you learn that is through doing the process, and you learn as you go, and then sometimes these memories come back to you.
That's really nice. Is there anything else you want to add for the discussion?
No.
Soupies? No.
I don't know what else is there.